So can we maybe talk a little bit, not the whole time today, but about GenAI, okay? Because I speak with my guests, I subscribe to a number of sources, right? Trying to keep in touch with the latest and greatest. I hear that value is yet to be realized with all the potential of GenAI, especially in enterprise.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the GenAI use cases have yet to be really realized in the enterprise. I think the real low-hanging fruit for the enterprise right now is what I would call the institutional knowledge use case. And that's the ability to interact with institutional knowledge that normally is kind of dark data, unstructured data that gets lost quite quickly because of the amount of it that's kind of collated over like a month. The amount of data that actually goes into the unstructured data repository inside of an enterprise is a lot. So I think it's true that the GenAI use case is probably not as precedent as we would like to think in the enterprise today. Certainly that institutional knowledge use case is something that a business can get traction with very quickly, both internally for internal knowledge bases and externally for kind of sales and support chatbots against knowledge bases. And I see a lot of traction around those use cases. And I see a lot of tools, being made easier for enterprises to be able to consume those types of use cases. And when I say that, I'm thinking about things like, Microsoft Copilot Studio, Amazon Q, tools where you don't really have to code to take advantage of AI. You can configure, and you can go a long way, to be able to leverage some of the knowledge you have internally to be able to interact and chat with it. In terms of the pure play GenAI use cases, I do see some of those for sure. We have customers in the AEC space, and the AEC space does a lot of requests for proposals, a lot of tenders. The ability to be able to learn from prior tenders to create new tenders is certainly one of the GenAI use cases that I see, that people would like to crack. And that's to do, with a few things. It's to do with scale. How many tenders can we actually, respond to? GenAI, if implemented correctly, could make that, much quicker and scale better. And there are some other nuances around use cases like that, such as, for example, I was speaking to one vendor who said that when they do variations of tenders, they actually have a bigger success rate. But creating variations of tenders is quite onerous to do and time consuming. So it's very difficult to do that with every tender. When you automate that, business process by underpinning it with data, and use GenAI, obviously you can scale that much better, and you can start to think about doing things like responding to variations of tenders, which makes your success rate, much better, and ultimately leads to more dollars and revenue into the business. And I do see some of those GenAI use cases, but to be honest with you, I think I don't see how many, at least today, have been implemented. I think, as I said earlier, I think a lot of companies right now are evaluating AI. They're looking at the hyperscalers because that's where most of their relationships are. They're figuring out which AI platform that they want to partner with. They're actually doing their own due diligence around some of those platforms. And of course, there is, a big security element. There is the element of provenance of training data, like we talked about earlier. There's some of the copyright issues that are floating around. There is, in most of these big enterprises, using AI systems has to be signed off by the CISO or the CISO's group. So there's all of those steps that you have to go through to start to be able to implement some of those AI projects. I am seeing a mix of models. I would say initially, a lot of those models were cloud-based models. I am starting to see some of those now, those private models actually, being used for certain, more secular use cases. But in general, I would agree with the statement you said at the beginning, which was there doesn't seem to be as much of that GenAI, work in the enterprise actually precedent right now. And I'd agree with that. I would say that right now, the biggest use cases I see is still the traditional, interact with knowledge base type institutional knowledge chatbot use case.